Well, good morning, everyone. I'll call this meeting of Heritage Oakville to order. This is our last meeting of the summer because in a few days it will be fall. Sorry to spoil the rest of your day, but that's where we're at. We have a number of items on our agenda today. We've got 3 discussion items and 3 information items. We have 3 registered delegations, and anyone in the audience may choose to delegate at some appropriate point during the course of the meeting. But anyone watching from home, you would have had to register prior to this meeting in order to delegate, and we don't have any such registrations in place now. Anyone watching at home who wants to follow the agenda, they will find that on oakville.ca on the town website, and you look for council and agendas, and it'll take you to the Heritage Oakville agenda for today's meeting. I'd remind everybody again that we are an advisory committee and that any decisions that we make today in the form of advice to Planning and Development Council will be dealt with by that council on Monday, October the 16th at their meeting at 6:30 p.m. Anyone wishing to delegate at that meeting should let the clerk's department know in advance of the meeting. So moving into the agenda now, have we any regrets, Madam Secretary?
There is one, Jason Judson.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest with respect to any matters in front of the committee today? No, seeing none. The next item on the agenda is the confirmation of the minutes of our previous meeting, and these have been circulated. Are there any comments on the minutes as circulated? Would somebody like to give me a motion? I think Kerry looks like she would like to give me a motion to approve the minutes as circulated. Any further discussion? Anyone opposed to that motion? That motion is carried. Thank you. Now we have our first discussion item is item number 4.1, which is a heritage permit application at 212 King Street. And I think, Carolyn, that's you. So off you go.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, members of the committee. So our first item here is the property at 212 King Street, and I'll take you through a presentation showing the proposed application. So here is the location map showing the property at the southeast corner of George Street and King Street. And again, it is located in the Old Oakville Heritage Conservation District. The property contains what's been known as the circa 1860 James Kelly House, possibly as early as 1850, and also contains later additions built onto the house. The application is to demolish the rear wings of the house. And this includes the rear portion of the porch, which is contemporary, and the detached garage, which is also contemporary as well. And secondly, to construct a new rear addition with attached garage. Here are some views of the property, and I'll just show you here. This is looking from King Street. And so the garage portion of the addition is proposed to be located here to the east of the house, set back where that existing later wing is there in the photo. And just for context, we'll get into this later in the presentation, but the district plan calls for the protection of views and openness on this corner here, looking from King Street down towards that gully and towards the property across from George Street. So this area is to remain open and this vegetation to remain as well. Looking in the bottom photo, this is a view taken from the corner with the brick portion of the house proposed to be maintained here. And the later or other wings here, the barn portion of the property, which we believe was originally a barn, as well as some other additions, and the detached garage to be removed. This is a more up-to-date street view showing the extension of the porch, which was built around 2019, and the detached garage. You can see in the bottom photo the driveway that is existing off of George Street. They are proposing to remove this garage and these later wings back here to allow for amenity space in the rear yard. And as part of this, again, they're proposing a new driveway for a new attached garage off of King Street so that the front of the property with the front door would have more of that access off of King Street as opposed to the existing access off of George Street. And just showing more detailed photos of the house. So again, this is from King Street, looking at the brick portion of the house. Everything you see in this image would be remaining. Coming around the side, you can see that barn wing and the extension of the porch along the side. Here is the brick portion to the left, that barn wing to the right, and of course the 2019 porch. And then these later additions here as well from the 1990s and 1973, which you can just see popping out in the back. This shows a better view of it from the back. So you have the 1990s sunroom and mudroom addition and changes, and the 1973 wing here. The top portion of the barn wing can be seen above that. And this is from the southeast corner of the lot. This is the very rear corner of the property. Here you can see the 90s sunroom and the 1973 two-story addition. This is looking from the east of the property towards the 1970s wing and the brick portion to the right. This is the east elevation of the brick portion to be maintained. They are proposing to install 2 windows here to put to match the existing windows on the other side. So they would flank the chimney and be symmetrical, keeping that overall symmetrical look that the Heritage House has. And to the left here is where that attached garage would be in the current location of the 70s wing. This is a view taken from essentially where the garage would be, showing where the new driveway would be proposed to come in here to access that garage. The site plan shows all of these changes a little bit more clearly. So you have the 1850s or 60s brick portion here. The barn wing is back here, and then the remainder of the yellow outlines you see are the 1973 edition, the 1990s edition, the 2019 extension of the porch, and the detached garage. So those are to be removed, and this new residential portion and garage portion are proposed to be attached to the rear of the brick house with a covered porch. And the access again here would be the new driveway accessing off of King Street. There is one tree to be removed. This was not included in the staff report. There is one tree along here, a spruce tree, to be removed to accommodate the construction of the garage. The remainder of the trees are proposed to be retained. There are still ongoing discussions, as noted in the staff report, between the applicants and the transportation staff at the town, with our arborist, the town's arborist and the applicant's arborist, to see how they could be designing this driveway so that it doesn't have a negative impact on these trees. So again, those discussions are still ongoing. If for any reason they are not able to accommodate a driveway here without impacting the trees, and the design of the proposal had to be changed, any changes, of course, would have to come back for heritage approval through Heritage Oakville if there are significant changes, or through staff if they were minor. Again, looking here, the corner of the property, which is outlined or discussed in the block analysis of the district plan, is to be maintained with no impacts here. Here's the elevation view from King Street, showing the brick portion here. Again, this is 2-dimensional, so difficult to see, but the garage portion of the new addition would be set back behind the Heritage House. To the left, the garage is a 1.5 story or less structure going on to the left, so it's lower in height than the existing building. To the right is the new addition, which maintains the height directly behind the Heritage House and then goes up towards the rear. You can also see the extension of the porch. The existing porch would be extended here to help transition from the old Heritage House to the new addition, and to ground those wings so that they are connected. This is the view from the west. So again, the brick portion here, the remainder of the wings, other wings being removed. The proposal is to construct a new addition which retains the existing height of the Heritage House, which is quite low. It's only 6.89 meters. So they are proposing to retain that height in the first portion of the addition and retain that height here through this gable, which references the gable of the brick portion, and then go up to a taller two-story height at the back corner, which is the farthest away from the Heritage House. So the goal was to be able to get a little bit more height because again, 6.89 meters is quite low. This new height is 8.09 meters, still well below the zoning requirements and below many other houses in the district. And again, with the materials and design, they're trying to do something that is complementary. It's a traditional design, gable roofs, cornice return, the wood shingles, multi-pane wood windows with wood shutters. But it's been designed in a way using the different materials that it is distinguishable from the brick portion of the house. So the idea being that you look at the whole of the structure once completed, you would be able to see which was original or historic and which portion was added, but that they still complement each other. This is the view from the rear yard, what would be the rear yard. This again, a traditional design with an oriel window here, wood shingles, lots of glazing in the back for the rear yard, and a covered porch. Looking from the east, we have the brick portion of the house. These are the two new 6/6 wood windows and shutters that would be added to match what are on the other side of the Heritage House. Otherwise, no changes on the brick house. Then here you have the 1.5 story garage portion. Again, the lower height, 1.5 story matching the Heritage House. And then coming away from the Heritage House, you have that 2-story height up here. And then again, back down to a lower height with a covered porch. Here are renderings. Again, these are not perfectly showing everything in terms of the existing conditions. There are 2 trees shown here in generally the same location as 2 of the larger trees on the property. But the idea is really to show the overall aesthetic and location of the new additions. So again, we have the brick portion of the house with the new double-car garage with the coach house aesthetic. And then coming around the side, this would be the new addition to the rear and the continuation of that porch. And then this would be looking from the west, showing the brick portion of the building and the new addition to the rear. So we did provide a history of the site. This is a little bit unique. There's a lot of information that we were looking through to understand what's on the site and what we believe to be of heritage value. So from the information we had in front of us to prepare the report, working with information from the district plan and the Historical Society, we have noted that there's the brick portion of the house built. We've had different dates between 1850 and 1860. There is some information out there saying it was possibly built earlier and moved there. But at this point, staff doesn't have any of these sources or information in front of us. So we're going by the information that's been provided to us so far. We understand also that there is a barn portion of the building that, from everything we had read, appeared to have been added to the house. The date is unknown. We know everything is there by 1910. So we also know that the district plan speaks to the modest, as they described the house, the modest 2-bay, 1.5 story house that appears to date from the 1860s. With the addition to the rear and the decorative veranda and entrance loggia being constructed later. So we don't have details in every single portion of the building, which is quite common, obviously, in the district, since many of these houses are quite old. But our focus has been on the retention of the brick portion of the house, which faces King Street. So a little bit more information for both the barn wing. We do know that the barn wing roof was raised at some point during the 1980s. Renovations showed that a new roof was put on to raise the height of the building, possibly when it was connected to the house to provide a little bit more headspace, or possibly when it was converted from a barn into a house. obviously, if it was a barn, those windows probably wouldn't have been there. So at some point, those changes were made. But again, we're not sure when entirely, when those changes were made. There were additions added to the site. This we have more information on. In the middle photo to the right is the 1973 two-story addition. And this has since been altered as well. This is an older photograph. The roof of this was redone as well and changed, as you can see in the bottom image, to a gable facing in the other direction. In the early 90s, we have the one-story addition to the south. That includes the sunroom that you see in the bottom, as well as part of the mudroom being redone and the open porch that was added. And this is, if you look in the bottom photo, it's the far right portion of the porch that was added at that time here. And then in 2019, there were extensive interior renovations done, including digging out of the basement under the house, as well as the extension of this porch. So again, this is the newer portion of the porch, so that's not actually historic, and the construction of this detached garage. And just to note that over the years, obviously, as these additions have been made around the barn wing, a lot of openings have been made inside. So there is a lot of the fabric of that building would have to obviously be reconstructed if that wing was to remain, depending on how a rehabilitation was done. Just because not all of that barn wing, the walls don't all exist anymore because of openings made between itself and the new additions added to the east and to the south. So again, this is our submission today. Our staff recommendation is to focus on retaining the brick building on the house, as you can see in these images. And I'll go through the district plan now in terms of our assessment of the application. So you have in the bottom left-hand corner an image from the block analysis that shows that it states the corner is quite wide open with an abundance of vegetation. So again, this is not being impacted by the proposal. It also speaks to the view of the lake down George Street, which also is to be retained. The second view it speaks to is the existing house on the opposite block, which should be preserved. So this view cuts down from King Street across the corner of the property and down to that neighboring site. And again, this is to be preserved as well because it won't be impacted by the new addition, which is here to the east and to the rear. The block recommendations include this point that the interesting topography of the area should be recognized and enhanced as a major feature. So as part of this application, the topography is not being touched. The new addition is being built into the existing grading. The block analysis also mentions that the predominant feature of this block is the deep gully, which runs the north to the south, and George Street is located in this gully. So this is around here. Because of the gully and the surrounding higher elevations, various viewpoints at higher and lower elevations give a unique interest to this block. And again, these viewscapes are mentioned here and are to be conserved. The district plan does have some guidelines on landscaping. Firstly, that landscaping amenities and the general streetscape follow appropriate design principles, reflect the area's historic background, and provide a pleasing environment for residents and visitors. Also that fences, walls, gates, pathways, plantings, light standards, and signs, because of their historic and aesthetic values, should be encouraged to reflect the history, scale, and character of the area. I would note that the detailed landscaping is not part of this application we have before you. Typically, what we do in these types of permits where it's a new addition or a new house, we look at just getting the general location of the building and driveway, et cetera. But we deal with the detailed landscaping for fences, pathways, any sort of hardscaping through a later heritage permit. So none of that is being approved today. So we can't get into assessing what they've proposed. What we're really looking at is just the location of that driveway. Also, visual paths, edges, vignettes, and vistas, which have defined the scale and character of the area, should not be obstructed or eliminated by detrimental visual intrusions. Again, the vistas views an open space at the northwest corner of the property, as identified in the block analysis, have been conserved. The guidelines for new construction include the following. Scale and height and mass be compatible with surrounding buildings to ensure visual connectedness and existing sense of scale. So our analysis is that the portion of the new addition, there is a portion of the new addition that is taller than the brick heritage house. The taller massing, however, is away from the heritage house and has been connected through what we're calling a connecting bridge to the brick house. And again, the garage on the other side is lower than the heritage house. The height, massing, and scale is also consistent and compatible with the district around. This scale and design of the new addition is complementary and consistent with what's seen in the neighborhood. Again, the height is still quite modest, even though it is higher than the brick house. And the extended porch will help, again, ground that new addition and provide a transition between the old and the new. The second point is that design, style, materials, and color for new construction to be considered on an individual basis on the premise that contemporary styles can be more appropriate in certain cases than emulating turn-of-the-century designs. So the design of the new addition has a traditional aesthetic. It references the heritage house. It's got gable roofs, articulated form, but it remains distinguishable from it. The finishes are a little bit different. It's been designed with an aesthetic that's complementary, but again, it's distinguishable from the brick heritage house. And finally, construction materials should be visually sympathetic with the existing buildings and streetscape, yet appropriate given the design of the new structure. Again, they're proposing wood shingle cladding, multi-paned windows. The white color palette allows it to blend in with the heritage house, but still allowing it to be different from it. And just a couple more here, that lot line setbacks be permitted to vary with consideration given to neighboring setbacks and frontages. The new additions to the rear of the heritage house, to the rear of the heritage house, which still remains prominent and visible on the site. And the setbacks of the new addition are deeper than the neighboring houses to the south and to the east. So that helps minimize the impact on the streetscape. And finally, new windows should closely match the historic windows in size, number of panes, frame, color, and reflective qualities of the glass. This is really more about the new changes to the heritage house. And again, those windows are to be 6/6 to match the existing. I would also just note here that 2 minor variances were approved in June, and that first is for a lot coverage of 28.63, whereas a maximum of 25% is permitted. The whole of the building without the extensive covered verandas is under 25%, just to note. And secondly, a gross floor area ratio of 36.45%, whereas a maximum of 30% is permitted. So the last bit is the guidelines from the district plan on the conservation of heritage resources. So first, that the distinguishing original qualities or character of a structure or environment shall not be destroyed. The removal of or alteration of any historic material or distinctive architectural feature should be avoided when possible. In our mind, the district plan identifies the heritage resource as the 1.5-story brick house, again with later additions. We do recognize that the barn wing is historic despite the unknown date or provenance or understanding of whether it was moved there or built there, but it is not considered by staff to be a distinguishing feature on the site. And there have been numerous alterations to the structure with removal of fabric, making it more difficult to see what was original and what should be preserved. The distinctive stylistic features or examples of skilled craftsmanship which characterize a building structure shall be treated with sensitivity. Again, the distinctive features of the brick portion are to be retained. And lastly, deteriorated architectural features shall be repaired rather than replaced wherever possible. In the event the replacement is necessary, the new material should match the replaced material and composition design, etc. And the architectural features of the brick portion are to be retained. So in summary, we believe that the brick James Kelly house, the distinctive heritage resource on the site, is to be conserved. The new addition has been designed with a scale, height, materials, and aesthetic that is complementary to and distinguishable from the heritage house. And the proposal allows for the retention of the overall heritage character of the surrounding heritage conservation district. The brick house being retained with the new addition, which is complementary to it and meets the guidelines of the district plan, will still allow that character, the overall character of the heritage district, to be maintained. In these cases, again, when it's not a Part 4 property with individual heritage attributes listed, what we're looking for is understanding what's the heritage value of the property, what's the heritage resource, and how do we maintain that overall character of the district. And so in staff's opinion, we believe that the proposal does retain that overall character of the district. And here we have the staff recommendation. So again, that's for the demolition of the existing rear wings. And I should note there that the garage, which is included in the application, and the construction of a new addition with attached garage be approved subject to the following: that final details in the windows, shutters, doors, trim, cladding materials, and paint colors be submitted to staff for final approval. And we've also requested that any historic materials from the barn wing, such as wooden beams, be reused on site or be made available for salvage. And secondly, that the permit expired 2 years from final date of approval. And I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thanks for a very full and complete presentation. I guess one of the things I'm hearing from you is that the 1.5-story brick house is the only surviving piece of built heritage on that site. Everything else has been added to, removed, and the garage and other things and extensions at the back. But the key anchor to this is the brick house.
Through you, Mr. Chair, correct. The brick portion is what we see as having heritage value. As we've seen with many properties in the district over the years, there have been rear additions added, and there may be historic structures that are maybe 100 years old, but they've been added to, cut open. And so our goal is always to maintain the really distinguishing heritage feature on the site, which is usually the front building, in this case, the brick portion, and then to make sure that any additions that are added are compatible with it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm not saying there aren't old heritage parts, but what I'm thinking is that if somebody could sort of appear from back in 1860 or whenever it was, they would see the brick house essentially unaltered. Everything else has been altered at some stage over the
Point of order.
years.
Point of order. Mr. Chair, nobody else has had an opportunity to ask questions. And
No.
I'm gauging by your comments that you're leading the discussion.
I apologize for that, and I'm not trying to. I'm just trying to understand because I'm getting so much information coming to me.
Okay.
And I was just trying to clarify that that seemed to be where the staff was coming from, but I was not attempting to lead. I don't do that.
Okay, thank you.
But I just wanted to just get my own head around it because I know we've seen other views of this. I just wanted to know where the staff seemed to be coming from. So having said that, then, any questions of Carolyn? Jerry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Carolyn, just to refresh our memory, has this been the first submission? Because I recall there has been a previous submission. We went to the site. Could you just summarize for us a little bit of the process that led us to this design today, just so that we can recap and refresh?
Sure, through you, Mr. Chair, to Jerry. So there was originally a pre-consultation meeting on site with Heritage Committee members, and there were changes to the design. Obviously, the very first design was just a concept, and so there were just more sketches, and we worked with the owners on that. They did make some changes, but the most significant change came later. When the applicants submitted to the Committee of Adjustment, they still had a previous design which had a higher height, and staff still had a concern with the height of the new addition. We were supportive of it being higher than the brick wing, but we didn't want it to be too high and overwhelming. So it was brought down, I believe, 0.81 meters, almost a meter, from over 3 feet from the design that went to the Committee of Adjustment. And by that point, staff and I were more comfortable, or we were more comfortable, as well as the Heritage Committee members who were still involved as part of the pre-con process, more comfortable with that proposal, with ensuring, of course, that the new addition wasn't too overwhelming on the site. So there have been a number of changes in the very, very beginning of the process, but since the application came to generally what you see before you, the most significant change was a reduction in height.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Okay, thank you. Councillor?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. How shall I say this? If you cannot give a certain date for that barn portion of the building, how can it be dismissed as not being retained?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Dudek. So from our perspective, it's not just about a date. It's also about the changes and alterations that have been made to it over the years. And also, again, looking at the district plan in our mind, when it included the inventory of heritage properties and included this one, it really included that view of the brick portion of the house, which and then related to later additions. So in our mind, we feel like that is the distinguishing feature on the site. Even going through, the area and from the street, that's staff's recommendation, is to keep the brick portion as the distinguishing feature. And knowing also that, yes, the barn portion is historic, we don't have a date on it, but that we feel there's been enough alterations to it that it doesn't have significant enough heritage value to be retained within the district.
Okay, one of the cases, I agree to disagree. The driveway portion, okay, looking at the plan, and I look at the drip line for that large tree, it's right in the driveway portion. Why would we be supporting a driveway being put there, given the age of that tree and the impact it's going to have?
And so through you, Mr. Chair, that is again a separate process being discussed by staff with the applicant, with their arborist. As myself, I'm not being a tree expert. Obviously, we want to see the trees retained. So the proposal that we have today showing that the trees to be retained, if the proposal said all the trees are being cut down, then staff would have a concern because the heritage trees, especially along the front, contribute to the character of the district. So we are essentially okay with the application as long as those trees at the front are being retained. Again, as I noted, if for any reason they can't be, and if the driveway is not supported by town staff, then it's going to have to come back for a redesign and come back to Heritage Oakville.
Okay. The other thing you had mentioned at the onset, and it was in the district plan, it was a modest building. Do you feel that this plan that we're being presented is modest?
So the new addition is larger. Absolutely. I think the modest character of the heritage house still is maintained because that portion is at the front. So the modest building that's there is still going to be a modest building. The new additions are set back to the rear. They start at the rear of the brick house, so that they're not surrounding it completely up to the front. And again, that height has been pushed back to the back corner of the property, so it's less overwhelming. So the modest character of the brick portion, I believe, is still there. We still need to permit people to build an addition that is larger. And this has been done, in many, many scenarios. So just because the original or brick structure was modest, doesn't mean that they couldn't build something a bit larger on the site. So that's staff's view of it.
Okay. So I guess, again, agree to disagree, a bit larger as opposed to much larger.
It is significantly larger. I would agree with you on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gittings. Then George.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think what I'm proposing to say is to turn this completely topsy-turvy, because the original structure on the property was the barn. And I had that confirmed to me by Don Sutherland, who older folks here will remember. He was the contractor, engineer, historian, heritage expert in town, comparable to Harry Barrett in plumbing and water. So after we moved into the house, and I'm speaking from knowledge because I lived there for 40 years. After we'd moved in, we noticed that, the floors were kind of moving a little bit. So I had Don to come in and have a look at it. Once he got into the basement of the house, he found that the original structure, he says, this is the first structure on the property, because the joists were not milled timber. The joists were logs. They were 15 to 20 to 25 inches size. And I had to test to that because I kept bumping it all the time. down there, and they were slipping out of the sills. And so he came up with a novel girdling system, if you will, that protected and shored up the whole of that structure underneath. The more we looked at the house, he then said, let's look at the house. And I had, a couple of years after we'd moved into the house, I had done a title search and found out different eras when the mortgage had, the property had some mortgages attached. One of the mortgages was earlier on. And to me, that said that that's the time when the barn was built on the property. It wasn't moved there, it was built. And that's what Don confirmed to me. He's the expert. And looking at the balance of the property, I noticed there was a notice of assessment, which meant the house or the property, whatever was on that property then, was habitable. It was 1855. So that's when taxes were first assessed. Subsequently, we looked at different parts of the property, and the front, I don't have the picture here, but the front view of the house beside the front door is a window. Below that window, just below ground level, is another course of brick that is wider than the course of brick for the window. So it's much wider. It's more like an entranceway. So that led Don and I to believe that the house, according to Hazel Matthews and other people writing about history of the area, houses were moved back and forth. That was moved there. Clearly, we don't know from where, and we don't know where, but we know that in 1855, at least, it was there when it was set up for taxation. And underneath this, what appeared from what Don and I discovered is that the house, in being moved, probably was turned back to front. And that was probably an underground entrance or a below ground entrance if the house had been situated in the reverse fashion. So really, I just want to get that part clear. The original structure was the barn, house was added to it, and you could see that in the construction. I don't know what it looks like these days, but what's been happening inside, but there were different levels in the house all the way down. The fabric of the house was one and the same. It really is. There's a reference here to Farley Mowat, and we talked to him one night. He was out here in the library promoting his newest book, and we talked about what he said in the book about this wonderful house out in Oakville. And he says, really, I had to say that to my grandmother because it was really an old house. And I really couldn't say anything else to get her upset.
Right.
But really,
your question to Carolyn is?
well, the question is because it's the topsy-turvy.
Yeah.
And therefore, the historic fabric of the house for I don't know how long now, you add it up, is a single dwelling with the rooms worked one through the other into the house. Now, I don't know what's happened in the interior since, but our concern is the exterior, really. So I just wanted to make that part clear, and that I think the west wall is the key element in that whole prospect. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that so we get on the record with what's the real story behind the two.
So that wasn't really a question for Carolyn.
No,
that's all right, George. That's all right.
I wanted to clarify, get the record straight.
Yep.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. Thanks for the presentation. There are a lot of moving pieces here. So it's gone through the Committee of Adjustment and identified as a tree removal. That is the spruce that you referred to earlier.
Correct. On the far back rear portion, or at the very back of those several trees along the side. Yeah.
And the one that remains up in the air is the one adjacent to the driveway.
Correct.
Depending on what engineering says. So that's still up in the air. All right.
Correct. As it stands today, it is proposed to be retained as part of this application that you see.
All right, we can speak with the applicant. Okay. The variances that went through is for gross floor area, and that's been approved. And the other one is for
Lot coverage.
the lot coverage.
Yes.
All right. All right, that's it. Look forward to hearing from the applicant and the delegations.
Okay, good. Any other questions? Put your mic on, yep.
The design is a
Put
proposed
you-
changes
Could
the,
you put your mic on?
okay, I'm on. Does the design as proposed change the front entrance to this building to King Street from Dunn Street?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, essentially the driveway would move from George Street.
Right,
And the front door of the brick house, which, you know, call it front door, it's the address is on King Street. That'll still remain, but I think it would be more used and more seen as the front entrance. I could leave this to the owners to speak to, but I doubt that the front door, original front door of the brick portion is often used as it currently is designed. But the idea would be for the vehicular and pedestrian access would be off of King Street, and that the George Street access would be closed off for a rear yard amenity space.
so the end result is the impact of the house is off King Street rather than Dunn Street. And therefore, the historic portion of the house becomes more featured. It's in the front, not at the side.
It would retain its presence, yes, on King Street, which it's always, that front door has always faced, yes, correct,
It's faced that way, but it's not been used, right?
correct.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Russ. Bob, did you want to ask a question?
Just a question, Carolyn. There seemed to be a difference between your report, which said no trees were going to be
Yes.
removed, and the application which said tree removal.
Yes, I should note,
Right.
note that there was missing that one tree, correct.
The tree that is going to be removed, is it a significant tree?
From a staff perspective, we do not think that it's a concern from a heritage perspective, again, because it's not related, it's not as visible from the streetscape perspective. It is in line with a number of trees behind it. So I can't speak, of course, to its health and everything, but from a heritage perspective, that is not as concerned for us because its removal will not really have much of a visual impact from the streetscape around.
Thank you.
Okay, fine, Bob. Okay, any other questions? George, a question this
A real
time?
question this time, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I'm just wondering why the application is before us today when we're still waiting to hear from the town, I guess the town arborist. At this stage, as I may, before you answer that, I may also ask that, or tell you that a number of years ago when we were looking perhaps to do something on the driveway from the side, because the garage was not up to standard, let's put it that way. We came to the town arborist because it's a town tree. And we asked him about trying to put a driveway in there and a garage, and he refused. He said, no, I'm sorry. You can't do that. You'll kill that tree. Any kind of a driveway that you put through there will kill the tree. The roots extend out to the complete canopy of the tree, which is today is probably even larger. So just as a matter of information, and so I'm asking, why are we here today when we don't have an answer from the town,
So
transportation staff?
Through you,
Right,
Mr. Chair, to
okay.
George. So with any of these kind of proposals, obviously, there are a lot of different permits that are needed. And heritage is just one piece of the puzzle. And sometimes heritage comes after, sometimes heritage comes before other permits. Obviously, just because someone has a heritage permit approval does not mean they're going to automatically get their building permit approval. If something doesn't meet building code, they're going to have to make changes. So this application was submitted to the town. We did actually push it back 1 month to try to give it a bit more time to see if this issue with the tree could be resolved. But now we are at a deadline where we have to take it to the Heritage Committee because it does have a deadline to be dealt with by October 30th. And so the next council meeting we can get on is October 16th. So the application we have today needs to be dealt with in terms of a timeline piece. But again, just like with any permit process, if a permit that comes later, it's not approved, then that means, they can't do the work that they were previously approved for through other permits. So Just because, again, they get a heritage permit doesn't mean you have your building permit. If they cannot resolve that through the tree, obviously they'll have to come back. There is this sort of chicken and egg thing, you know, committee of adjustment, heritage. At some point, something has to go first. The way the process is that the driveway permit comes later. However, we have been working with the applicant, with the town staff, I should say, not just myself, but working with the applicants since earlier processes to see if a solution can be worked out with for this tree. So if it is, then it would move forward. If it can't be resolved, obviously it's going to have to come back no matter what. But we are at a timeline right now to be dealing with the permit.
Fine, George. Jenny?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It appears that the tree and the driveway is becoming an issue. And I'm looking at the site plan and I see that there have been attempts made to arc the driveway so that it respects as much of the tree canopy as possible. But can we provide within the recommendations that the landscaping treatment of whatever the driveway is made of can be permeable and friendly to the roots of the tree, which replicate the canopy above? So can that be incorporated within the recommendations? Because it seems to be a concern.
So through Mr. Chair to Jerry, we haven't included it in the staff recommendation again, because I can't speak to that level of expertise in terms of what kind of driveway would protect the roots of that tree. So the understanding working with staff through the building for the driveway permit processes, they are looking at newer technologies that maybe weren't available years ago through previous proposals that would actually allow the tree's roots and to be protected. So if the committee wishes, you could add another piece to the recommendation. My suggestion was maybe not just to get too detailed in terms of how to do that, but maybe just noting that you want to ensure that that tree is conserved through any future driveway. As it stands right now, the application proposes to retain the tree. So if through any driveway discussions that tree can't be maintained, then this permit is kind of null and void. So I'll leave it with the committee, but I would say we just wouldn't want to get too detailed in terms of how to do a driveway, just because again, as staff, we don't have that expertise from an arborist perspective.
Yeah, the staff report does talk about a permeable driveway, but you're saying that really would be part of the second process when you do the hard landscaping and the driveway, and that the town arborist would have a significant say in the treatment of the driveway, but we could include it if we wished.
Yep, could,
Okay.
exactly.
Brenda?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. I just have a question for a couple of questions. First one is page 21, which is the one that looks like this, the side view of the porch. I'm asking, could you tell me where the historic porch starts and where it ends on this photograph?
So the historic portion is really just the portion along the brick wing. So as soon as you enter the barn wing, that's all been added.
Okay, so everything in this view where it projects out and along the almost four sections
Is new, correct?
Okay, thank you. One other question subsequent to that. When I look at the diagram of the house, let me move forward for you. And the drawings, I guess we would call them the renderings. There's a lot there. Sorry, this time on page 31.
One moment.
So I'm curious for two questions on this view. One is, was any consideration given to the chimney that's coming in the new construction that's sort of coming as the dot on the point of a period on top of the existing heritage home? Does that have to be there? Or could it
Sorry,
move?
through you, Mr. Chair, the chimney on the new addition
Correct.
just have to be in that location. I could ask the architects probably could speak more clearly in terms of what's going on internally. From our perspective, it was far enough away from the heritage house. Again, looking at the bottom view, the top view, of course, it looks worse because it's two-dimensional, so it looks like it's right on top of the Heritage Building. But when looking at the west elevation, we felt like it was far enough away. Obviously, it has to be a certain height just to meet code away from the roof. But yeah, we didn't see it as a significant concern, but perhaps the applicants could speak in more detail as to why it's there exactly.
Sure, thank you. And then my last question is, given my first question regarding the porch, what was old, what was new? And I look at this diagram and similarly, there's a replication of the old porch. Again, the style of the old porch along the new portion as it makes that left turn. I'm wondering why we would do an exact match again, so that it's difficult to tell what is old and what is new.
Yes, and through you, Mr. Chair, this has been discussed because often we do want things to be a little bit different. I think in this case, because the idea was, because there has been this presence of this porch for so long, and again, it was redone in 2019, extended then. So I think the applicant's thought was they didn't want to take too much of that porch away that people have gotten, you know, used to seeing on the site. Staff would be supportive if of a porch that was a little bit different, again, to differentiate between the old and the new, if the committee wanted to see something a little bit different. In this case, it was felt that because it wraps around to where the new addition is, that it was a bit separate, but you are correct, that it is, they are continuing that aesthetic, that design of the old piece onto the new, whereas typically we do like to see something a little bit different. It's just difficult with porches because then it's difficult aesthetically to change from that historic look and then turn the corner and all of a sudden make something sort of a little bit different, so that you want it to have a continuous feel. So this was a bit of a unique solution for this. But you're right. Typically, we do something a little bit different, but the thought was that continuing the historic porch helps provide transition to the new addition.
So perhaps if we requested something like a color change or something, allowing the style, but a shift in some color use on it.
Yeah, something, it's something that was subtle enough to show a difference. Staff would be supportive of, again, just to distinguish between the old and the new.
And then my very last question is with regard to the existing historic home. Now I'm looking at the view, which would be page 33. So it's the view of the new garage and the existing home sort of on the side looking over the driveway. Do we normally allow the addition of windows on either side of I mean, I understand aesthetically someone would want it, but that seems to be a significant change to the home to add the windows there.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. With this house, we felt like it was on sort of the side elevation. It's consistent with what is being proposed on the other side. There may have been, it's difficult to know, there may have been windows there because it's bricked and it's painted, so it's difficult to see what changes could have been made. But yes, I think the idea was really is trying to retain that overall form and that view of the Heritage House from the northwest corner of the property, and keeping that veranda, which we wouldn't want to change. And we did feel like it is in keeping, but yes, it is a change to that elevation. And you know, the thought was if they're kind of replicating what's on the other side, then it's something that could have historically been there. The 6 wood windows and may have historically been there. But again, understanding too, that really we wanted to make sure we really maintained what you could kind of see from the street. And obviously you can see this piece from the street, but it was thought that this is still compatible with the Heritage Building.
Hey, thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Okay,
Chair.
Brenda? Anyone else with questions for Carolyn? No? Thank you. Thank you, Carolyn. Somebody wish to speak for the applicant? So name, rank and serial number for the benefit of the secretary.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Terry Martino with Gwen Weiss Architect and Associates, and we are the agents for the owners at 212 King. I would like to thank Carolyn for her very articulate and comprehensive presentation. I think there's actually no real reason, suffice to say that we agree with her assessment. If I could, I would like to highlight perhaps some of the process, and I think there was a question from the committee with respect to that. In the design of the proposal, and we've worked diligently with staff, the owners, and our firm. We've met on 2 occasions out on the property with staff and members of certain members of the Heritage Committee. We attended the Committee of Adjustment, at which time the Heritage staff had reviewed the proposal and had concluded that it met the guidelines of the district plan and that represented a good development consistent with the neighborhood, as did planning staff. And my point here is simply that this is reviewed for the Committee of Adjustment at the time that we applied for the 2 variances. And not only did Heritage staff recommend its approval, but planning staff did as well. Since that time, we've again gone back with the owners and worked with Heritage staff, and we actually reduced the height and the massing. We understood that there still could be some concerns. And just to clarify, the height, the overall height of the building was brought down. It used to be 6 feet 7 inches, the peak above the lower story roof, and now it is at 310. So there was a significant reduction in the height and the massing. I understand that there's another delegation wishing to speak to this, and I would appreciate the opportunity to perhaps address any of the comments or concerns that would come up. I'm happy to answer any questions. I've sort of changed my little presentation here. I think there was a couple of questions with respect to the proposed driveway from King Street. I'd like to share some information of where we're at with that process. I think it's important. To be clear, what is proposed is a single 11-foot wide, 3.3 meter driveway entering from King Street and going to the garage. I think there was a question with respect to the infringement on the drip line. The sugar maple that's there, the proposed driveway encroaches 20% into the required 6.3 TPZ or the setback. So it's 20% infringement. With the spruce tree, which is on the eastern border of the property at the entrance to the driveway encroaches into that TPC of that particular tree, 26%. This has been confirmed by the arborist report. It's been shared with the town. Notwithstanding, there was some difficulty engaging with the people in engineering at first. But I can tell the committee that we are working through that. We're presently doing site sections. We're looking at doing some exploration of the root systems. But what is proposed is a single driveway, 11 feet wide, infringing only 20% and 26% respectively on the town trees. The driveway proposed is built on a GeoWeb support system with very minimal excavation. These specifications have been provided to engineering. So in short, there's an excavation of about 2 inches of topsoil in the location of the driveway in the affected areas, the 20% and the 26%, but the entire driveway is built like this. Anyhow, what then is poured on this plastic GeoWeb tech system is IPD, which is a bedding that obtains 98% compaction right from the truck. The town should be familiar with this process. It was used extensively all throughout the downtown for the preservation of existing trees. The pavers, which are permeable, are then set upon that, and it's finished. So that there is no compaction, there is no extensive excavation whatsoever with the creation of this driveway. The town has this information. They've asked for some additional site sections, and we're working with them diligently to obtain the driveway permit. So that is the most up-to-date information I can provide for the driveway portion. And we believe that it is a reasonable infringement. I can also state that the town itself has a process for this. It's called a TPZ encroachment, in which my clients are willing to enter into with the town. They actually have a form and a process for this, recognize that these things happen. And this is the town's policy. I guess there was mention of the one tree that's being removed. That one tree is well set back. It's sort of towards the middle of the garage. This is not a town tree, it's a private tree. And it's being taken out of as an abundance of caution because there is a basement underneath that garage. And that it is the professional opinion of our arborist that through excavation, that one tree you could hit some structural roots and it may become structurally unstable or at least a hazard tree. So the recommendation of the arborist is to take it out. That's not to say that we couldn't air spade or hand dig that foundation and perhaps see what roots are there. But it is the recommendation of the arborist to take it out. It is it's reported to be in fair condition by our arborist, that tree. It is one in a line. There's a sort of a row there, hedgerow of trees right there. So it's sort of grown in. It's really one-sided. And again, I guess the highlight is that it's a private tree. Other than that, I think I'd be happy to answer any questions that the committee may have, but I would request an opportunity to speak to any concerns raised by additional delegations, if possible.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I can't accede to that because this is your time and delegations speak and where there is no back and forward debate amongst delegates. But the committee will hear what the delegates say and they'll measure what they hear against what has already been presented. Is there anything more that you would like to add?
In light of that, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess in the presentation by staff, I think the most important thing is in the district plan is that it recognizes the Heritage House to be a modest 1.5 story, 2-bay. And they're clearly speaking about the brick portion, which we're retaining. They mentioned that there are additions that have been put on, but in the district plan, that is what is said. In the block analysis, that's what they've picked out on this particular house. With respect to views, I think Carolyn did an extremely comprehensive job explaining that the views identified in the district plan and the block analysis have to do with the gully, have to do with the views down Dunn Street. And I would submit that it's a pedestrian passage to the lake, to the Front Street walking into Dingle Park, and that the design respectfully keeps the addition some 8 meters set back from Dunn Street, where the permissible setback is 3.5 on the flankage. So I think the design very expertly stays in line with the existing form of what the addition and what the form is there now. I think that is further demonstrated by the comments of both planning staff as well as heritage staff, that it's consistent with development in the neighborhood. It doesn't overpower any of the buildings. It's actually quite lower. And that it meets the guidelines of the district plan. I think we may hear something with respect to fences and walls. I'm going to quote from the district plan that there are a variety of fences and walls in the study area. Almost every property has its own fence or wall design material. Most of them tend to reflect the early 20th century. The diversity of the material and height adds to the overall charm of the area. So through a landscape plan, and I understand Carolyn has suggested that it would be an additional proposal that we would reappear in front of the committee. But I think that any comment with respect to the line along or any proposed fencing is in fact in keeping with the district plan. It says that, and I quote again, the diversity of the material and height adds to the overall charm. So that fences and plantings along these private property lines further enhance the streetscape and define the public realm from the private. And I think that the proposal is consistent with that. Yeah, that's the conclusion of my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Good, thank you. Any questions of so Jerry and then Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Terry, for that explanation. In light of the fact that there seems to be a really big concern about removing that tree, and you did mention that if you had to, you would look into hand digging, because as I see on the site plan, there's a tiny portion of the garage footing that would interrupt the canopy, therefore the roots of the tree, if this is to scale, if the canopy is to scale. Would you consider that if it becomes something that, you know, the committee and the planning staff have issue with?
Through you,
In terms
Mr.
of
Chair.
retaining that tree instead of trying to work with the tree rather than demolishing it right at the outset.
Through you, Mr. Chair, absolutely. You know, it is the
Thank you.
professional recommendation that it be removed from the arborist, but if it's possible to retain that tree, I'm all for it and would seek to do it, so.
Thank you. Dave?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you. Thanks for being here, Mr. Martino. Question about the tree. You're working with staff currently to try to get this moving forward. Further to staff's comments earlier, we're up against a clock. End of October, we time out on this application, correct? Are we going to have, at what stage are you with staff on the tree? Obviously, you're waiting to hear back in terms of what they would like to see occur.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Giddings. Yes, I believe now we actually have some traction in the matter and are going back and forth, notwithstanding the sort of slow start. We have provided them with that information. They've requested the site section that we're presently studying, or at least providing for them. And I expect to get back to engineering with respect to our findings in the short order. But with respect to the deadline, I mean, we've already stood down once at the request of the town. We were supposed to be at the August meeting. You know, since the application, the sort of 90-day period is so that, as Carolyn had mentioned, the time frame is running out. We've done everything in accordance. We went to the Committee of Adjustment first. We received their approval. We've attended now this meeting. We believe that the driveway permit process will be resolved one way or another and shortly, so that we should have an understanding of exactly where we are at that process. But it is separate from this process and the building permit process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions of Mr. Martino? Thank you, Terry. We do have 3 registered delegates, and I was talking with them earlier about timing. I mean, delegates as such tend to have a 10-minute limit. The rules say they can come as a group, and it's still 10 minutes. I know last time we had 2 people managed a 10-minute presentation very well, but I think in light of the time that it's taken to hear from other people, whilst I don't want to extend the meeting unduly, I don't want to cut short the time that's available to those who have registered to delegate, simply because we've taken a long time to get here. We've been an hour at this now. So the first delegate that I have here is Anita McKay. Now, Ms. Hawkrigg, did you 2 want to do together, and or is it 3 separate presentations? Just help me here.
So Jane and I, it's together, but we have 10 minutes each. So I'll do the first part. I'll go sit down and Jane can come and do the second part, and then Francine's is completely separate.
Yeah, that's fair. And remember that, you know, this is a long meeting and we don't want people's attention spans to drift too far. That's not your fault that we've got to this stage in an hour. But if we avoid repetition, that would be helpful. So if it's 3 separate presentations, that's lovely. And I discovered after the meeting last time that I, in fact, control the clock, not the secretary. So I'm going to push a button here that says, this is power, yes. This is the mayor's chair. He's got the thing. So I'm going to give, so you'll actually be able to see how the time is going. So you're on the clock.
Okay, great. Thank you. So let me introduce myself. I'm Anita Mackey, and I am on the board of directors of the OLRA and also chair of the Working Heritage Group of the OLRA. And I also, with my husband, Michael Shane, we've lived in the district since 1994, and we live in a heritage home ourselves. And when we moved here, my husband and I from Toronto, the only place I wanted to live was Allen Street, Navy, south of Lakeshore. We've been coming here since I was a child to St. Andrew's Church. This is where I wanted to live. And I love heritage. We respect heritage, and we feel it's a duty to protect it. We're a bit disappointed that we have to be here today, and it's mostly we're disappointed in the staff report on this historic property. And I want to say that our presence or our presentation is not in any way negative or personal against our neighbors. We find this very uncomfortable. This is very difficult, but here we are. 212 King Street is a critically important property in this heritage district, both historically and given its key position on a key corner and on the upslope of the gully. If you could go to the next slide, please. So our position is that the application as currently presented is not compatible or sympathetic to the heritage house itself and to the overall character of the district and should be denied. We're going to talk about three main points. I'm going to cover the first one, which is the combined brick and frame structure that was in existence since circa 1891 is the heritage structure and the fabric that needs to be retained and incorporated into any proposed changes. Demolition is not appropriate or consistent with the heritage district plan and the guidelines. Jane will talk about the outbuilding of the driveway and the overall mass and impact of the proposed building. Next slide, please. So this shows that the brick portion of the house and the frame addition, which predates 1891. In 1910, the fire insurance plans show them there, and they're in that virtually recognizable form that they exist today with a few additions on the back. Next slide, please. So these are from the 1972 Canadian Inventory of Heritage Buildings, and you can even just see, looking at it there, this is 1972. This is very recognizable to the property that is here today. Next slide, please. There's the side view, and you can see that narrow window up at the top, which still exists. That side view, the change there was the bay window was removed and the porch extended. We'll show some of the others. On my right-hand side, I'm not sure, you can see those two windows up in the heritage portion of the building, the 1891. This is the frame portion that was covered in stucco. Those windows are still in the same place. They were allowed to be replaced with a historically matched replica with approval. And so those are still there and still recognizable. Next slide, please. You can go to the next one, I think, so now you can start to see as the form has evolved on the color slide. That's the existing view now. That's when they extended that porch in 2017, which we'll get to. You can still see that window at the top. You can see that the bay window was removed and a French door was allowed to be put in. They asked that the bay window be retained and used somewhere else because it was historically significant. And you can see those two windows on the south elevation as well. Next slide, please. So here are the guidelines that support this position. First of all, in the heritage district guideline, it refers to this modest 2-bay, 1.5-story house that appears to date from the 1860s and with the addition to the rear and the decorative veranda. That veranda was probably added to when they attached the two properties together, it connected them. The census shows in 1891 that a 9-room building existed on this site. The brick building would not have been a 9-room building. So both of these had to have existed by 1891 and are still recognizable today. The guidelines do not support demolition of the heritage fabric of a building. Specifically, it says the distinguishing original qualities or character of a structure or environment shall not be destroyed, and staff has not demonstrated why they are allowing this. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, in 2017, they got approvals to extend that historic porch and veranda along the west side of the 1891 frame building. And the staff report concluded, and I'm quoting, with exception of the first floor bay window, which should be retained on site and reused in future alterations and additions, no other heritage fabric is to be directly impacted by the new structure. Staff therefore recommend that this application be approved. Next slide, please. So the exterior fabric and frame referenced in that report remains in place and is visible today. Nothing has changed the exterior heritage fabric of the house from what was approved in 2017. The building would have had to be opened to add on at the east side, but the other sides of that building are still there and still being retained. And the guidelines specifically anticipate replacement of original material when that's appropriate, because we all have lived in old buildings and they all need to be restored and renovated and worked on from time to time. The guideline says, in the event the replacements is necessary, new material shall match in composition, design, color, texture. New windows should closely match historic windows in size, number of panes, color, and reflective qualities. That was done when this house was renovated and approved to be renovated. I find it shocking that the staff would now use the fact that that has been approved, that some alterations made, stucco repaired, as now a reason for it having lost its historical heritage value. If that precedent were allowed, most of the homes in this heritage district would be at risk. My home would be at risk. I have had to replace the stucco because it was falling off. The plaster and the plaster was falling off. We've had to restore windows. We've had to do new shingles on the roof. We've had to do things, many homes. 176, which is being renovated in that historic part of the home, it was taken right down to the wood frame. Are we now saying that that home in the future would be at risk of being taken down because some of the heritage fabric was taken off and approved to be renovated? I could give you countless examples of homes in this district that would be at risk because of this precedent. I find that this is the most shocking part of this application, and I find it strange that the staff, when in 2017 they were so careful to point out that heritage fabric was being retained, would now say, oh no, it's been altered so much, there's no heritage value left. So I can go to the next slide, please. Our conclusion. So on this first key point, the combined brick and frame structure circa 1891, probably earlier, but we know that that is a very verifiable date, is the heritage structure and fabric that needs to be retained and incorporated into any proposed changes. Demolition is not appropriate. It's not consistent with the district planning guidelines, and this will create a terrible precedent. Our heritage in this area is fragile. The fact that we don't have individually designated properties in part 4, that should be irrelevant. And I find that shocking that argument is raised. This is a designation as a group as part 5, but that means each individual property is also to be retained its heritage cultural properties. That's why we do the inventory. That's why the study is so paid attention to, that we categorize, catalog the heritage value of each property so that when we make changes to it, we know what we are protecting and we know what can and cannot be changed. So I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Jane Hoffrick, to do the second part of this presentation.
Just 1 second before you go. There might be questions of your particular delegation.
We could take them at the end together, Jane and I, if you'd rather.
Reset, because Jane has 10 minutes,
Yes.
right? So are there any questions of Anita, of this delegation? No, no, good. Thank you very much indeed for your delegation.
Thank you for your time.
Now, I know this is sort of out of order on what I've got on my list, but I know it's in order for the way that you've structured your presentation, and I know Francine is happy with that. So Jane, if you would again introduce yourself to the secretary. I won't start the clock until you're ready.
Okay, all right, thanks very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members of the Heritage Oakville Committee. My name is Jane Hockrig, and just for some background, I think a lot of you know me, but I was a past president of the Oakville Lakeside Residents Association. I am a member of the Oakville Lakeside Residents Association Heritage Working Group, working closely with the town the last 1.5 years to try to update the plan accordingly. My husband, Jamie McCray, and I live in an 1832 house at the corner of Navy and William Street. It's the William Sumner House. We renovated that in 1997, and we actually won an Urban Design Award for its sympathy to the Heritage Plan. So I want to cover the last 2 points that we have about this application. And this one is really about the outbuilding and driveway. And in our mind, it needs to remain facing George Street at the southwest end of the property. Historically, any detached outbuilding and driveway access to this property has always been on the southwest side of the property. And the 1910 fire insurance plan and the 1972 Canadian inventory pictures show this. The attached garage as currently proposed, while set back, it does cut off historical views that have traditionally been along the east side of King Street. More importantly, it's not just the trees, though, that are important about this. Is attached garages were not typically what you would see in a heritage district plan, and it is not something that we see in the district plan guidelines. And so in our mind, the fact that we're even considering something on that side is troublesome from a heritage and historical perspective. The proposed driveway, we've heard some of the comments by the applicant of the things that they're trying to do to protect these trees. But I guess because of our view that it shouldn't even be considered for that side, why do we need to actually talk about the trees? The 2 guidelines that in our mind are relevant to this is the distinguishing original qualities or character of a structure or environment shall not be destroyed. So in that way, we're focusing on the environment and the heritage feel of this view. Visual paths, edges, and vignettes, you can read it, basically that define the scale and character of the area should not be extracted or eliminated. Our point is that the attached garage and driveway create a problem in terms of consistency with the guidelines. I will try to advance myself. Yeah. So our 2 key points are no, that's wrong. But anyhow, yeah. Thank you. Our 2 key points then are that we strongly believe the current structure, 1891 structure, is the heritage fabric to be retained, and as a result should not be demolished. And any outbuilding should remain facing George Street at the south and west end of the property. Could I ask you to do the next slide, please, for me? Thank you. So we also want to move on to a 3rd point, and that's really about the proposed design and massing of this overall building. From our perspective, the proposed design and massing that they're seeking today is in fact overwhelming in terms of the modest form of the structure that you'll see. The district plan does identify 212 King Street as a modest home on a tree-lined street with open views given its prominence on a corner property. That's really captures in essence what the character of this specific property is. And the intention of the district plan and the long-established practices that this body has approved is that alterations and new builds should be compatible with and sympathetic to the property and the streetscape. In our view, the changes proposed will significantly impact the heritage character, not only of this property, but the character of the district because of the significance of the views and the vistas that will be impacted. There are 3 elevations that we want to point your attention to. Next slide, please. So the first one is the elevation, which is described as the north elevation facing King Street. From our perspective, even with the setback of the garage and the addition to the east, it swallows and engulfs the brick structure. So remember, keeping in mind that we think the actual heritage fabric is more than the brick structure. If you keep the brick structure alone, though, it's going to be swallowed by this. And the distinguishing original qualities of that modest brick structure is being further altered by the addition of 3 new windows that were not there. And so if we're saying, if the argument is we're keeping something that was there and so people can see that it was there, it's being altered in a way that it never was. And so let's not kid ourselves that this is just not a new build. Next slide, please. This is the west elevation, and this is probably the one that's most disturbing. Well, the first one's very disturbing. This one is particularly disturbing because it shows you again how small and modest the brick structure is compared to the massing that's being provided here. The height moving to the 2 stories will be even more impactful from a streetscape perspective because of the gully nature of this lot. The height and massing, so the fact 3'10" over the brick structure, when you're standing on George Street and looking up, it will be quite significant in terms of its impact from our point of view. Next slide, please. And finally, the south elevation. There will be no, so the picture on the left represents what we believe is the circa 1891 structure that should be retained with the, we'll call it a frame structure and the brick. It will be gone and it'll be replaced at a corner with what you're seeing here. There will be no visible heritage attributes that you see when you're walking up George Street from front. It will be seen as a complete new build. Next slide, please. We took the liberty of using some sticky notes to show you sort of what's happening in terms of the orientation of the overall massing of this new build. So on the left side, which is the pink, is our sort of attempt to show you what is there today, with the blue highlight being the circa 1891 structure. And to the left of that is the extended west veranda, which was approved by this committee and approved by council in 2017 as an appropriate addition to this heritage structure. And we have the detached garage below. On the right, you'll see in the yellow, we've highlighted what the new build is going to look like. And we also have added the hardscaping fence that is along George Street that is included in the rendering. And given that the applicant has openly stated that they want to have a pool in there, we know that the fencing along there will have to be of a certain height to allow for the safety issues there. And so that the views that are traditional and have been traditional on this property since 1891 are going to be significantly changed. It's changing the footprint from a primarily north-south orientation to an east-west orientation. And in our view, that affects the vistas of this property that has been in place for over 125 years. Last slide, please. So our position is that the application is currently presented to you is not compatible or sympathetic with the Heritage House and the overall character of the district. We've done some detailed analysis. We're very disappointed with the staff recommendation. As Anita mentioned to you, we don't like to be here. We like to be here to support heritage. And given the responsibility, the challenging responsibility that you have as a Heritage Oakville committee, we're asking for your support in helping us to retain the elements of a historic property that has been around for 125 plus years and is an important part of the overall character of the area. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jane. You kept well within your allotted time. Thank you. Any questions of the delegation? No, thank you. Francine Landry? You want to give your name and so on to the secretary?
Yes, hello, good morning. My name is Francine Landry and I live at 140 John Street in Oakville. I've been here in this town since my husband and I married in 1982. And so I'm still a newbie. So, or I certainly was when I've lived in 2 heritage districts. So I just want to give you a little bit of background about myself and as to why I'm here today, because I'm standing before you because this is an important, extremely important matter. You know, my husband, Terry Smith, as some of you may know, I've been actually sitting, I don't usually sit on this side of where you're sitting is where I'd be sitting, but we were in a room. This is way nicer being here. From back in the day when I was on LACAC. And my husband was also on LACAC and then later Heritage Oakville, and he chaired along with Harry Barrett and was chair. And unfortunately, he left us too soon, but I'm hoping you're still paying attention to wood windows. I don't know, he's telling me that from above. So, so we've lived in 6 different homes in Oakville, 2 of them in heritage districts. And each of these heritage districts were distinct, and each of them are special reminders of the historical significance of Oakville's development as a town. So when we first moved here, there were 2 districts. First Heritage District, which is the old Oakville Heritage District that we're talking about, and second Heritage District, 1st and 2nd Street. The 3rd Heritage District, where we had our second house when we first moved to Oakville, realized what a lovely downtown and fell in love with the history, the heritage, the community, the people, everything. George's Square. Anyhow, I had noticed that a lot of houses were being torn down around us, and I brought to council and said, what are we going to do about this? Houses are being torn down, historic houses. And that's when a plan was put into place to do some looking at that area. And that's why we now have a 3rd Heritage District. So we did also restore 2 of the properties that we have owned, and also built what you would maybe call a reproduction house, which looks like an old house, because of course it was built with all the right things that an old house would have been built with. I want to just say to you that I have been, and I'm telling you this because I want to give those of you that I don't know or I have not yet met, been really involved in heritage and community and history in this town for many, many years. Having sat on this committee and also having received the Spirit Award for Heritage and History, as well as through the Heritage Planner in Oakville, I was put forward for a lifetime Heritage Award with the province of Ontario, for which I'm very proud. But I have to say the thing that made me most proud was starting for the Oakville Historical Society's 50th anniversary, the Oakville Historical Society Ghost Walks. I know that sounds rather trite, but it is not, because I had taken my children, we had taken our children to Williamsburg, and they had no interest, being young teenagers at the time, in looking at houses. And I can tell you, the thing that did get them going was looking at going on ghost walks. And so that is why the Oakville Historical Society, still doing it today, I'm no longer doing it, but I would really be happy to don my gown and take you all at dusk with a lantern, as well as please for the staff now, to talk about exactly what this actually means. The reason I had started that was to give education, to let people have an understanding. My husband, after he had left his corporate business job, became a realtor, and a mighty fine realtor, I might add, and I worked alongside him to help with client care and staging, and he sold a number of houses in the area. And something that I did through the Oakville Historical Society, the legacy, to teach people about what history and heritage truly is about. What does it mean to have this community? We have this wonderful thing, Heritage Oakville, and the town really does promote and are proud, honors the history of this town. And I would have to say that if my husband had been showing these, the present owners had been their agent, he would educate people on what this means to be part of a heritage district. Because I understand people do want to do changes to their homes. I've done them in every single home I've lived in, and it's a lot of fun, but you can also have to compromise, because when you live in a heritage district, there are guidelines. Heritage Oakville, we live in a actual heritage district. What you add should be complementary to the existing structure. And so the reason I brought up the Historical Society ghost walks is something, the first things I say is in 1834, William Chisholm, who's the founder of our town, sold 50 lots publicly on July 10th in 1834. You had to put half of the money down right away, and you had to put half the money down within a year. That was a lot of money. There were no mortgages back then. So the lots are all 104 by 104 in that area, and the building must be a minimum of 24 feet by 18 feet and completed within 18 months of the sale. And this was, of course, done by craftsmen, by hand. Every piece of wood was felled with an axe and built. Now, most of the houses, if not all of the heritage houses in the area, would have started at about that size, 24 by 18. Now just think about 24 feet by 18 feet. I'm sorry for the other ones of you, not doing it in meters. So, and it had to be built out of stone, brick, or frame. Nothing much was built out of brick. That would have been extremely expensive. And we reused our buildings. They already knew about reduce, reuse, recycle. It was done all the time. Houses were moved, and it makes very good sense. The house that that we are speaking of, you know, this house in question, we're questioning what the original structure was, and it makes total sense from what George Gordon says. George Gordon, hey, George. My husband was the agent on selling that property in 2016-17. The people who purchased the house understood, because it was explained that they are purchasing in a heritage district and there are guidelines to follow. And seeing what they did to the house, actually, they did follow the guidelines and it was approved. Now, today in front of us is something very different. And so seeing the house as it is now, or what the proposed house is, and I'm going to just say it, it is facadism. You're looking at an original, what they are deeming an original portion, and George and his wife, Carol, who have lived in the house for 40 years, I can tell you, I spent a lot of time in that house, would know if they were told that the house was actually, the original part was the middle. It made sense because the house in the back does not have a lot of lot in the back. Corner houses, mostly would be a house that would have a driveway at the back, which it presently is, the driveway and a garage. I lived at the corner of Thomas Street and King Street, a block away. The house has a barn, one of the two only barns in the entire town. And we were very careful in keeping that barn when we did it, when we lived there, and they were always around the corner. So if you go, and I'm trying to think of all the houses in that area, there's another house, a brick house facing Thomas Street at William, facing west. That house also has its garage around the corner. The houses would not be, you have to think about the times that what this was. People had horses, they smelled. They didn't want to keep them close to their front door. And so they would put them, if they were able to, if they were on a corner lot, would have them around the corner. And so this is how this house has stood as it looks now, still looks very much as it did pre-1891. We're talking over 125 years. And if you are trying to put forth, and if the staff is, the error here, I think what happened with this, with the staff report, is that they have diminished the pre-1891 part of the house. This is still an original feature of the house. And as George Gordon has said, it is the actual oldest part. This is one of the 51st lots that were built in this area. This is part of what makes a heritage district. Big houses, small houses, and I'm sorry for the people who own this house who want to do what they want to do. It is, we have used Gren Weiss twice. They do very good work. Now, usually what happens is that obviously the client gets to say what they want, and they didn't understand perhaps the ramifications of what you get in a heritage district. So attached garages, I'm shocked none of you brought that question up, because attached garages are not recommended at all in the heritage district, and you see very few. The only ones you do see are houses that are infill houses on a property that had no house on it. That's why they're able to do that. You can't do that to a heritage house. And the height of the house, an addition is always built below what the main house is. The main house is the brick house and the house behind it that they had built, and still that was the same height. You're talking about almost 4 feet. It's a brand new house with an old house stuck in the front. And you see this sort of thing in Toronto, and you always go, oh my God, facadism. We don't have facadism in Oakville, and I hope that we don't have it again. But my time is up. I thank you all.
Thank you, Francine, and you kept pretty well to your time. Thank you very much. Any questions of this delegation? No, good. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wishes to delegate with respect to this item? No, good. We're confined to the board. Now, it's 11:09. Not going to rush anybody. We lost Jerry because she had a prior engagement. She had to go leave at 11. We still got quorum. My timelines, as you all know, I have to be home before noon. So I have to leave here probably about 20 minutes to 12. About 11:40 would be my absolute timeline. We have a contingency plan in place. So even if you lose the chair and vice chair, Councillor Duddock has graciously agreed that in the special circumstances where the councillors are not normally allowed to be elected, they can't be elected chair of this committee, but they can stand in a situation like this. So if we go on longer, because we will give this matter the time that it requires. We're now confined to the board, as I said. We need to get some discussion going, some sense. And I think you probably recognize now where my original question came from, Councillor, because I'd read the stuff and it seemed to me it was a little bit about the definition of what was the prime heritage portion. Is it the brick house? Or is it the brick house plus the other buildings to the south of it? And that seems to me to be the fundamental difference here, and it clouds everything as to how you deal with this. If you decide it's A, one thing is acceptable. If you decide it's B, the other thing is acceptable. It's not the only issue, but it seemed to me when I had read the material that was a really important issue for us to bring out. So, discussion. Brenda?
So, Mr. Chair, I have to go back and concur with Councillor Duddock's initial concern about a point of order.
Are you plugged in?
I am
Switched
plugged
on?
in. Sorry, I probably have my head turned away. I am concerned that the conversation has been guided a little bit today to focus on the one element when I think the committee has brought up a number of elements of concern during the meeting. What I would like to do is at the appropriate time, I do have a motion that I would like to tender, but I am concerned that we step back and think about the ramifications of this project, because I think much like the property on Front Street where we spent considerable time and what we saw happen on that property when it was actually developed was not what we thought was going to happen. I think it's important to make sure that we are very clear about what is going to happen on another key property, because I was disappointed with what happened on Front Street, and I'm very mindful and concerned that it could happen again here, because we have a number of elements that are in play with other parts of the town making approvals, such as the forestry team, such as planning, such as committee of adjustment, things that have happened, but they're all impacting on our decision as heritage. So at the appropriate time, I would like to present a motion.
A motion is a good way to get discussion going. So, and normally, in the regular course of events, we sort of take the staff recommendation as the motion, but it doesn't have to be. The staff recommendation is not a motion. It's just simply a staff recommendation. So, and I can't hear you very well here, and I know it's partly me, but I think other people find the acoustics here not really very good. So if you could get the mic really close and talk really loudly into it, and then if the secretary or somebody could try and, if you've got it written down, that would help. So Brenda, the floor is yours. Make a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my motion is, whereas the Oakville Heritage Advisory Committee views and concurs with the 2017 staff assessment that the heritage elements of the property at 212 King Street requiring preservation constitute both the brick home and the wood barn. Therefore, the committee does not support the 2023 staff assessment to 1, permit the demolition of the barn structure, 2, permit the change of the views and vistas of King Street by moving the driveway, from George Street to King Street. And 3, permit the introduction of an attached garage. And I realize that some of these are outside of our, but I just wanted to put something on the table that sort of captured what I was hearing for discussion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Do we need to add to that, Madam Secretary, and that the application be denied? Because that's fundamentally what's the purpose of your motion. It's the direction, but I think we have to say that. Perhaps it's instead of the whereases, it starts off that the application be denied for the following reasons. 1, that the heritage portion of the house to be preserved includes the frame building. And I can't remember where your 2 and 3 went. I'm not leading anyone anywhere. I'm just trying to clarify what it is we're going to be making a decision on. Because what essentially the motion is deny the application, but correctly it says why. Okay. So just before we come to Councillor Derrick, Madam Secretary, have you kind of got that?
If it could be provided via email, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, okay. So but for the members of the committee, what Brenda's motion is that the application be denied for the following reasons. Fundamentally, that the heritage element to be protected and preserved includes the frame building as well as the brick building, right? And then there were other elements with respect to the driveway access. Okay. Councillor Duddick.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the clarification. I think that's a valid point, having that at the outset in terms of what the motion is. I wholeheartedly agree with not only the motion, but the various attributes, concerns that she's outlined. I really, I can appreciate staff have a different point of view, but as I said from the onset, I think this is a case of we have to agree to disagree. And as such, I fully support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, we do love and respect our staff, but as they always say to us, we're here with the right to disagree with them. Any other comments? Any other discussion on the motion? Yes, one, Brenda, and then Carrie. Sorry.
So,
use this one.
Oh, use this one. Okay. No, I just have a question about the motion that Brenda's suggesting. What if we only agree with it partially? In other words, she's saying deny because of yada, yada, and yada, but maybe I only like yada, but not yada and yada. Catch me? So I don't fully agree with the motion. If you know, so how do I deal with that?
Vote no.
You just vote no? I mean, is it that simple?
You could do that, but the prime message on the motion is the application be denied. But I think you could vote no to it.
So if I vote
Is there
no to it,
anything
I'm
down
saying
here?
that
Maybe that's a friendly amendment.
Yeah.
Because if it's a friendly amendment, maybe Brenda will say, let's just narrow this down.
Yeah.
So the point that you were saying that you didn't like was the second element, was that the drive?
Well, actually, I would support the staff is where I'm coming from. So I guess I would just deny this new motion if I'm supporting the staff. I
Right.
support the staff's
Yes,
opinion.
Yeah.
So how would I handle this motion?
you would vote against?
Okay, that would
Because-
be that simple.
Yes. So I thought you were saying you agreed with the first line of the motion, which was reject the application, but you weren't agreeing with the reasons,
Yeah, I
the
think
yada and the yada. But if you're in favor of the staff recommendation,
Yeah.
you would simply vote against this motion.
fair enough. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
And if the motion fails.
Right.
Or if the motion fails, then we would come back with another motion to approve the staff recommendation.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
So I think we have Kerry and then we have Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
This particular application's, and I'm a newbie, I'm only starting my 9th year on the committee, but it strikes me of an application we had in the 1st and 2nd Street district where they bought a red brick home, but at the end of the day, in a heritage district and didn't want a red brick home. And this one kind of strikes me this way as well. With George's knowledge, it actually even appears that the designation on this property is incorrect. If the barn in fact was original and the brick portion of the home was added, then the barn should be recognized as that. And though there has been alterations, they're clearly not significant when we look at the photos of the existing house. We have seen tons and tons of applications where the additions are large, but they always celebrate the heritage. And I feel in this particular case that this application does not celebrate the existing, certainly not the brick and obviously not the barn because it's being proposed to be demolished. I thank George actually for your input because I certainly wasn't aware. I'm sure some of the people here were not aware of that. So I will be supporting the application or the amendment to deny this application.
Just a small point of clarification. The house is not designated as part 5,
Sorry,
so that there isn't in fact a misdescription. Councillor Giddings?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Considering the level of interest with this application, the as yet to be decided tree adjacent to the driveway, the COA approvals that are in place, and the number of questions raised around this table, I believe that it would be best served to go before town council. I'd ask staff here to please work with your colleagues in engineering to make sure that we have an answer on that tree so that can come before council. So I think it would be best served coming to council. Nothing against the expertise on this committee, but I think that's the place for the decision. And so I will support that, and I would like to thank the residents for coming out today.
Okay, thank you. Any other people? George, and then Councillor Dudley.
Just clarify, does he
Yeah,
recommend it?
I agree with Councillor Dudley completely, wholeheartedly, and that this application should be denied for all the reasons given forth, primarily by the OLRA and the historical aspects of it.
Thank you, George. Kathy again?
Yeah, could I just clarify, Councillor Giddings, are you supporting the denial?
Yes.
Okay.
Sir.
Now, this is where we've got to be clear. And I think these are Brenda's notes. Is that what I've been given? And I think you mean disagrees, but I think the motion is that the application be denied for the following reasons. One, that the heritage portion of the building to be protected includes the frame structure and the brick house. And that the addition of an attached garage is inappropriate. Now I've got permit to.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Visitor, I don't get that.
May I suggest a 5-minute recess so we can get the motion up on the
I
screen
think
so
we
the
should
committee
tidy
can see
it.
it?
I think we could. I thought I could do it, Natasha, but we can't. So I'm going to shut her down till 11:30. We're going to take like, a couple of 3 minutes or 5 minutes, because I'm under time constraints. There's other business to do. And I know that everybody else is, and we're all volunteers and we're all, carving out time from whatever else we've got to do. I know there's a budget committee meeting coming up and we've got to clear this place. So our councillors and everybody else are going to be up to their eyeballs in it. So can we'll just call a recess and we'll reconvene not later. Okay, everyone. The meeting is in order again. So let's just take a moment to read what's on the screen. But the motion is that the heritage permit application HP 030/23-42-20K for the demolition of the existing rear wings and the construction of a new addition with attached garage at 212 King Street as attached in Appendix B to the report dated August 15, 2023 from the Planning Services be denied for the following reasons. A, the brick home and the wood barn should both be conserved. The views and vistas should be conserved. That an attached garage is not in keeping with the character of the Heritage Conservation District. So that's my sense of where we were at. And that is the motion that is before you, moved by Brenda. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Okay, so I'm going to ask, sorry?
Could I just add one word?
Yeah, sure, where, George?
A, the brick home and the wood barn structure
Okay,
should both be conserved.
yep. Good, George. Takes a lawyer's eye to see these things. Thank you very much. Okay, so that's the motion. Is there anyone opposed to that motion? One. The motion carries. Thank you, everybody, and thank you to the delegations and the applicants for your patience. And I think we've given the issue a good airing. No doubt when it gets to the Planning and Development Council, which it will do, there will be some further discussion on our recommendation. And, but we've done our job to give council the guidance that it expects from us. Okay, so moving right along, given that I've got to leave in about 3 minutes, item number 4.2, which I see Carolyn is still up for, and that is the multiple property designation, the Part 4 designations that we're now dealing with on a regular basis. And would you like to give us some input on that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can do a very brief presentation. I think this is one that everyone on the committee and staff are supportive of together. I'll just wait for the presentation to come up quickly. Just to show you, there are 5 properties. We've got 289 Allen Street, 395 Lakeshore Road East, 407 Lakeshore Road East, 1072 Tanglewood Court, and 291 Watson Avenue. And I'll just show them to you briefly. The first at 289 Allen being one of the Brantwood homes and having a value for as a craftsman home in the Brantwood area. The Detmold House, also part of the Brantwood area, also associated with Molly McGee, who was the first accredited female war correspondent for Canadian American newspapers. There we have the War Cup House, which is also part of the Brantwood subdivision, one of the earlier homes, associated with Isaac and Charlotte Warcup, who were prominent business people who owned a gristmill, and with Edward Orr, a well-known local dairy farmer, and again, value as part of Brantwood subdivision. And then we have the Westwood House at 1072 Tanglewood Court. This is a unique example of a vernacular home built with Georgian and craftsman influences, and it was home to the prominent Heavens family who constructed it, and with Dr. Teskey, who served as a local doctor in the area. And then we have the Stock House, which is located again back in the Brantwood subdivision, a representative example of the craftsman style, and associated with Sidney Frederick Whiffen, who was a local builder in the Brantwood area. And then our recommendation is that the following properties, 5 properties, that notice of intention to designate be issued for these 5 properties, and we'll be taking this to council at the next council meeting. Any questions? Happy to answer.
Thank you very much. I know we've all read these reports, that they are pretty good and a great reading. Really enjoying it. Councillor Giddings, are you giving me a motion?
I will do that.
Okay.
Also, one quick question in terms of feedback from residents at all?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Giddings, we do have one for the first one, and that's a good note. 289 Allen Street We are putting the second report on hold for a little bit to go to the P&D meeting because we want the owners are of the country, and so we'd like more time to discuss with them. It's still on the agenda today, which they are aware of, but they're also aware that no decision is being made today, just a recommendation. So yes, that's good to point out that that one will just pause. Otherwise, we've had support so far for the designations.
So support from the others?
Yep.
The other owners, and thanks for reaching out to the residents the other day after our back and forth. Very much appreciated. And
Good.
yes.
And you have the motion. So we have a motion to accept the staff recommendation. Any further discussion on that? Or are any opposed to that motion? Seeing none, the motion is carried. Thank you very much. Item 4.3 is a confidential item, of which we've all received notice. It's a nice, good news story. We can't really talk about it. It's a state secret, but I think we've all enjoyed reading it. But we can, in fact, however, pass a recommendation that the nominees for the Ontario Heritage Trust Award, as set out, be endorsed. So, and Councillor Duddick has given me that motion. Anyone opposed to that motion? Seeing none, that motion is carried. We've got information items, the district plan update.
Mr. Chair, I'll be very brief. We are moving forward with scheduling additional public consultation with the OLRA as a result of feedback received at the last Heritage Oakville meeting. We are currently searching for the budget for that, but I am confident that it will happen. And we are also looking at moving forward with the plan and guidelines, as also discussed at the committee. And the tentative date for our first public meeting for the plan and guidelines update for Old Oakville Heritage Conservation District, I believe is October 17th, but more information will be forthcoming soon. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Good, thank you. And the delegated heritage permits, as usual, these are for our information. If we need any further information about any of them, talk to the staff after the meeting. The designation project update was essentially item 4.2, unless there's something else you want.
Yes, Mr. Chair, just generally speaking, we're at about 20 properties that we've taken through the process. We do have now 2 objections, which we'll be dealing with, and that will be going back to council to see if council would like to continue with the designation process, and we'll update you later as to where those stand. But that's where we're at right now. Thanks.
Super, thank you very much. Can I have a motion? Sorry, question, Kerry?
Sorry, I know we all want to wrap up. Given all the new designations that are happening, has, as part of that, has council been approached about increasing the heritage grants? Because otherwise they won't be meaningful.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we are involved in the budget committee discussions for increases to the grant program.
Good, good, good news.
I figured, but I thought I'd ask.
Yeah. And since you're on your feet, Carrie, thank you for your motion to receive the information items. Anyone opposed to that motion? None, the information items are received. We don't have a motion to adjourn, but I'm sure Brenda's good at doing that because she's just back from Finland and she wanted us to get off. So that's a motion that nobody objects to. The meeting is adjourned. Our next meeting is October the 24th. Thank you as always for the great gift of your time today and for all of your care and attention to the applications before us. Thank you, everybody.